The first thing they heard was the sound, a deep, powerful roar that shook the ground beneath their feet. It wasn't the sound of a normal helicopter passing overhead. It was something heavier, something that demanded attention. The laughter, conversations, and clinking glasses at the family gathering slowly disappeared as everyone looked toward the sky. I stood in the middle of the perfectly decorated lawn, surrounded by expensive tables, elegant clothes, and people who had spent years believing they knew exactly who I was. Then the shadow appeared. A massive silhouette moved across the grass. A matte black military helicopter emerged above the trees. And in that moment, my father's confident smile disappeared. Richard had spent my entire life believing he understood my limits. He believed I was the quiet daughter who never achieved enough. The one who worked some complicated government job nobody wanted to understand. The one who stood in the background while my brother Kevin collected praise. But he never imagined what was actually happening above the clouds. I looked back at my stunned family. Through the deafening sound of the aircraft, I calmly said, "That's my ride." Only 2 hours earlier, everything had been completely different. The afternoon had started like every other family celebration, a beautiful park, a carefully prepared barbecue, a gathering designed to celebrate my brother Kevin's latest achievement. Kevin was the family's pride and joy. The golden child. The one everyone talked about. My father stood in the center of the crowd, telling stories about Kevin's promotion to senior brand strategist. Every achievement, every project, every success. Richard repeated them all with a smile that showed exactly how proud he was. I stood nearby, quietly speaking with a man wearing a simple professional suit. He wasn't there as a friend. He was a senior agent from the Diplomatic Security Service. We were discussing details about an upcoming joint operation, a mission where his team's safety would depend on the decisions I made. But my father didn't know that. To him, the man beside me was just another guest. Richard walked over with his usual confidence. He placed his hand heavily on my shoulder, the kind of gesture that looked friendly to outsiders, but I knew better. It was his way of reminding everyone where he thought I belonged. "This is my daughter," he announced. "She flies helicopters for the Army." For a second, I thought maybe he would finally show some pride. I was wrong. He smiled and continued. "Basically, a bus driver with a more expensive uniform." A few people laughed. My father laughed the loudest. He always knew exactly how to make my accomplishments sound ordinary. The DSS agent beside me kept his professional expression, but I noticed something, a tiny change, a shift in his eyes, a question, not about my father, about me. In his world, reputation mattered, trust mattered, and my father's careless joke had created doubt before a mission even started. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just another family insult. It was bigger, much bigger, because my family knew one version of me, but they had never met the person I became when the cockpit door closed. They knew Avery, the quiet daughter, the one who rarely talked about work, the one who disappeared for weeks and returned without explaining where she had been. But they didn't know Valkyrie, the pilot, the leader, the person responsible for bringing people home alive. Valkyrie existed in a world where mistakes cost lives, where confidence wasn't arrogance, where respect was earned through actions, not words. I had spent years keeping those two worlds separate because I wanted peace. I wanted a normal life. But my family had mistaken my silence for weakness. I remembered a Christmas dinner years earlier. Kevin was sitting at the table, explaining a marketing campaign he had created. He spoke about brand strategy, customer psychology, and business growth. My father listened like he was hearing a military briefing. Every word mattered. Every detail impressed him. My mother, Carol, kept encouraging him. "Tell us more, Kevin." The entire room belonged to him. Later, when there was a quiet moment, I tried to share something from my own life. I told them about a high-altitude training exercise I had completed. Weeks of physical exhaustion, extreme conditions, training designed to prepare pilots for situations where one mistake could cost lives. My mother smiled politely. "That's nice, dear." Then she immediately turned back to Kevin. "Tell us about that campaign budget." That was when I understood. They weren't just unaware of my world. They had decided my world wasn't important. To them, Kevin built brands. I simply flew machines. They saw his work as ambition. They saw mine as a hobby. But they never saw what happened on the days when my skills actually mattered. Because somewhere far away, in a place I couldn't name, I wasn't Avery anymore. I was Valkyrie 1, and people were depending on me. For years, my family believed they knew exactly who I was. To them, I was Avery, the quiet daughter, the one who never talked about work, the one who disappeared for weeks and returned with nothing but a tired smile. They never understood that silence wasn't because I had nothing to say. It was because some parts of my life were too important to explain. They didn't know about the nights spent studying flight patterns. They didn't know about the missions where every decision had consequences. They didn't know that while they were celebrating Kevin's business achievements, I was carrying responsibilities most people would never experience. Because my family only saw what was visible, and the most important parts of my life happened where nobody was watching. I still remember the day everything changed. It was a Tuesday morning, the kind of morning where the world looked completely ordinary. But thousands of miles away from home, nothing about my day was ordinary. I was sitting inside the cockpit of an MH-60 Blackhawk helicopter. My call sign was Valkyrie 1. Outside the aircraft, a violent sandstorm covered the mountains. Visibility was almost non-existent. The wind was unpredictable. The terrain below was dangerous. A special operations team was trapped on a narrow mountain ridge and needed immediate extraction. The situation was changing by the second. Inside the cockpit, the green glow of the instruments was the only light. My co-pilot, Chief Warrant Officer Miller, watched the conditions carefully. He had more flight experience than most people could imagine. His voice came through the headset. "Valkyrie, this landing zone is extremely unstable." He wasn't questioning my ability. He was reminding me of the reality. One mistake, one wrong movement, one unexpected gust of wind, and the helicopter, along with everyone inside it, could be lost. I looked toward the controls, my hands were steady, my breathing was calm, because in that moment, there was no Avery. No daughter, no family disappointment, no need for approval. There was only the mission. "We don't leave people behind," I said. "I've got this." The helicopter moved lower. The storm fought against us. The aircraft shook violently as we approached the mountain. Every adjustment had to be perfect. The space between success and disaster was measured in seconds. The rotor blades passed dangerously close to the cliffside. The wind pushed against us from every direction. But training takes over when pressure reaches its highest point. I didn't think. I reacted. Small movements, precise corrections, complete control. The helicopter touched down on the uneven ground. For 2 minutes, I held that aircraft steady while the team moved through the storm and climbed aboard. 2 minutes may not sound like much. But in a situation like that, 2 minutes feels like a lifetime. The final operator entered the aircraft. Before disappearing inside, he looked toward the cockpit. He didn't give a speech. He didn't need to. He simply nodded, a sign of respect, a silent message between professionals. Trust. That was something my family never understood. Respect isn't created by titles. It isn't created by money. It is earned in moments when people know their lives are in your hands. And that was the biggest difference between my two worlds. My family judged what they could see. My team trusted what they had witnessed. My mother, Carol, always tried to keep peace. She would pull me aside after my father's comments and say, "You know how your father is? Just let him have his moment." She believed ignoring the problem was the easiest solution. No arguments, no tension, no uncomfortable conversations. But what she never understood was that every time she asked me to stay silent, she was choosing comfort over truth. She wanted a peaceful dinner table, but I wanted to be seen. For years, I allowed them to believe their version of my life. I let them think I was ordinary, because correcting them would mean revealing a part of myself I had worked hard to protect. But my father's joke at the reunion changed everything. His words didn't just hurt my feelings. They created doubt in front of someone who needed to trust me. The DSS agent's expression told me everything. He wasn't laughing. He was evaluating, and I understood exactly what was at stake. My reputation wasn't about pride. It was about responsibility. If someone questioned my capability, the consequences could reach far beyond my family drama. So I made a decision. I stopped trying to convince them. I stopped hoping they would finally understand. Instead, I would show them. Not because I needed revenge, because sometimes the truth needs to be impossible to ignore. I walked away from the party. The music, the conversations, the fake smiles. My hand reached into my pocket and touched my secure communication device, a small piece of my real world. The world my family knew nothing about. I checked the operational notification. The timeline was tight. A normal extraction process would take too long. A vehicle, a transfer, a flight from a nearby location. Too many delays. The mission opportunity would disappear. Then I saw the option, a protocol I had only studied during training. Directive 7. Emergency field extraction from a civilian location. It was rarely used. It required special authorization. It consumed major resources. It wasn't something you activated because you wanted to prove a point. It was reserved for situations where timing and capability mattered more than convenience. I paused. This wasn't about embarrassing my father. This wasn't about proving I was better than Kevin. This was about restoring confidence before an important operation. I opened a secure channel. The message had to be precise. No emotion. No personal explanation. Only facts. Interagency confidence compromised. Need immediate demonstration of operational readiness. Requesting emergency extraction capability. A few seconds later, the response arrived. Approved. Valkyrie 1, your aircraft is inbound. I looked at the message. Then I put the device away. My family thought I was leaving the party. They thought I was walking away because my father's words had hurt me. They had no idea. I had just called for the one thing they never expected. The truth. And it was coming from the sky. I returned to the party like nothing had happened. That was the strangest part. Everyone around me was still living in the same reality. Kevin was still talking about his promotion. My father's friends were still smiling and pretending his jokes were harmless. The guests were still enjoying their expensive food and perfect afternoon. But I was no longer part of that world. I felt like I was standing between two different lives. The one they believed I had, and the one I had spent years building. Kevin continued. His speech using words like strategy, growth, and success. Everyone listened, everyone applauded. And for once, I didn't feel hurt because I finally understood something. Their approval had never been the measure of my worth. I walked toward the open field beside the pavilion. The grass was perfectly cut. The sky above was completely clear. I checked my watch. The time was almost here. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed the DSS agent watching me carefully. He didn't know exactly what was happening, but he knew something was different. He had seen my father's joke. He had seen the doubt it created, and now he was watching to see what I would do next. Then, of course, my father couldn't resist. He looked across the lawn and saw me standing alone. A smile returned to his face. Leaving already, Avery? His voice carried across the crowd. Don't worry. We won't keep you. He laughed. Your bus is probably waiting somewhere. A few people laughed with him. The same kind of laughter I had heard my entire life. The kind that reminded me I was never taken seriously. But this time, I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel embarrassment. I simply looked toward the sky because there was nothing left to explain. The moment for words was over. Then, I felt it. Before anyone heard it, I felt the vibration. A low, distant pulse, almost like a heartbeat. The grass beneath my feet trembled slightly. A few guests looked around. Someone stopped talking. Kevin paused in the middle of his sentence. The sound grew stronger. Whump, whump, whump. The confused expression slowly turned into concern. People searched the sky, then the trees moved, and everyone saw it. A matte black MH-60 Blackhawk appeared above the tree line. No bright markings, no unnecessary display, just a machine built for serious missions. The entire atmosphere changed instantly. The helicopter moved with incredible precision. It didn't simply fly. It controlled the air around it. Its shadow crossed over the entire gathering. The laughter disappeared. The confidence disappeared. Even my father stopped moving. The aircraft descended, lower, lower, until it hovered just above the field. The wind from the rotors exploded across the lawn. Tablecloths lifted. Papers flew through the air. Guests covered their faces. The carefully prepared family celebration turned into complete chaos. Kevin's presentation notes scattered like pieces of paper in a storm. The same people who had been laughing moments earlier were now frozen in shock. The side door opened. 2 crew members stood inside, wearing full operational gear. They weren't there for a performance. They weren't there to impress anyone. They were there because this was their world, a world my family never knew existed. I turned around, and I looked directly at my father, the man who had spent years reducing my life to a joke. His expression had completely changed. The confidence was gone. The pride was gone. All that remained was realization. My mother stood beside Kevin, holding onto his arm. Her face showed something I had never seen before. Understanding. They weren't looking at a helicopter. They were looking at the truth they had ignored for years. I stepped forward. The sound was almost unbearable, but my voice remained calm. I looked at my father. That's my bus. Then I turned away. Not to punish him, not to embarrass him, but because I finally had somewhere important to be. I looked toward the DSS agent. This time, there was no doubt in his eyes, no question, only respect. He gave me a small nod. I returned it, a silent conversation between professionals. He understood. The aircraft wasn't a message to my family. It was proof that the person they underestimated was exactly who she said she was. I moved toward the helicopter. The wind pulled at my clothes. The noise surrounded me. But inside, I was completely calm. I connected the harness. The crew pulled me safely aboard. The Black Hawk lifted away. Within seconds, the family gathering disappeared beneath the clouds. My father spent my entire life believing I was ordinary. He thought my work was simple. He thought my achievements were nothing more than luck. But it only took 30 seconds of rotor wash to destroy that illusion. I wasn't there to witness what happened after the helicopter disappeared. My attention was already back on the mission. But later, the DSS agent told me what happened. The party became completely silent. The same people who had laughed earlier now stood without words. My family remained frozen, staring at the empty sky. The agent walked toward my father. He didn't yell. He didn't insult him. He simply handed him his card. Then he said, "Your daughter is not a bus driver." A pause. "You have no idea who she is." And then he walked away. 6 months later, everything had changed. I stood inside a secure briefing room preparing my team for our next operation. The same DSS agent sat in the front row. When I finished explaining the plan, he spoke. "My team's confidence in our air support is absolute, Major. Major. Not Avery, not the quiet daughter, not the person my family ignored. In that room, I was Valkyrie. A name earned through experience, through pressure, through protecting people when everything went wrong. That was the respect I had spent years building. Not the kind that came from money, not the kind that came from family approval, the kind that came from trust. I found my real family in places I never expected. Late nights in hangars, after difficult missions, sitting beside the people who understood what sacrifice meant. My crew didn't need me to explain myself. They already knew. One evening, while reviewing flight plans in my office, my personal phone buzzed. I looked down. A message from my father. For a moment, the old feeling returned. The younger version of me that wanted his approval. The daughter who spent years hoping he would finally say, "I'm proud of you." The message was simple. "Your mother and I saw the rescue report on the news." "Was that you?" For the first time in my life, he wasn't mocking me. He wasn't dismissing me. He was curious, maybe even proud. But something inside me had changed. I looked at the message and I felt peace. I didn't need his approval anymore. I didn't need him to understand my value. Because I finally understood it myself. I quietly archived the message. Then I returned my attention to the flight map in front of me. The future was waiting. My father thought I drove a bus. And maybe he was right. Because every mission was a journey. A journey through danger, a journey through uncertainty, a journey where my job was simple. Get everyone home safely. I wasn't the daughter who disappeared into the clouds. I was the person who flew into them so others could come back. My father thought my ride was a bus. He never realized it was the vehicle that carried heroes home.